Good evening. Welcome to Monday, April the 14th, 2014, regular meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Roll call, Mrs. Cropper.
Ms. Sanborn?
Present.
Mr. Merchant?
Sanborn. Yeah, present.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Present.
Mr. Waldman?
Present.
Mr. Lewis?
Present.
Public comments.
We've not received any cards this evening.
Okay. Dr. Klein, recognition.
Yes, I'm pleased tonight to introduce and present to the board students from Amelia High School. These students participated in the Science Challenge as well as the Regional Science Olympiad Tournament. We have several of those students with us tonight, and Denise Amiot, the assistant principal, will be presenting those students to us this evening. So I'll welcome Ms. Amiot to the podium.
Good evening, Ms. Sanborn, members of the board, Dr. Klein, and Ms. Cropper. This evening, I am honored to present to you Ms. Joan Lewis and Ms. Caitlin Schertz and the Amelia High School students who competed in the Regional Science Olympiad March 1st. They placed 8th overall in the tournament. We have some medal winners, and I'm going to let Ms. Joan Lewis introduce them to you. And Ms. Schertz, come on up here.
Good evening. I'd like to take a minute to recognize our science students. Not everyone could be here tonight because not only are these kids really good in science, but there are kids that are our athletes, there are top scholars, there are NHS members, there are student council members, and obviously they're very busy. So some of them did have conflicts tonight. First, we competed in the Claremont County Science Olympiad, and the following students placed 2nd overall, and that gave us a berth to the regional tournament. They were Matt Rowland, Carter Houndshell, Cody Jandes, Connor McClanahan, and Nick Calhoun. The team of R.J. Cass, Mason Hancock, Trent Edwards, Scott Schilling, and Alex Tabertka placed 2nd overall in the nature of science. Our sophomore team, Bruce Lockaby, Lena King, Noah Padro, Jeremy Hopkins, and Shayla Peters placed 1st in life science and 1st in the nature of science. Our freshman team of Christina Cass, Owen Kuzik, Zach Kuzik, Joey Haven, Logan O'Connor placed 3rd in life science and 2nd in nature of science. In addition, we went on to the regional competition, and the top 6 schools advanced to the state. We only had, because of snow delays, 2 weeks to prepare for this tournament. So next year, they're already talking about starting in October. So we hope to make it to state next year, but they still did an outstanding job. They were there all day on a Saturday and represented West Claremont well. These were Josh Bartko, Derek Call, Mitchell Dance, Sean Danaher, Sarah Kearney, Nick Calhoun, R.J. Cass, Trent Edwards, Mason Hancock, Carter Houndshell, Cody Jandes, Aaron Kriebel, Connor McClanahan, Jeremy Hopkins, and Noah Padro. There's 2 special awards I'd like to say, and that is Sean Danaher and Sarah Kearney placed 6th overall in the district or in the region in disease detectives, and Mason Hancock and Trent Edwards placed 5th in circuit lab. So again, congratulations to all of our students.
Picture and switch together, you guys. Sarah, can you step out front? Yeah. And you guys want to get on your knees? Sure.
Get out of the way.
Do you want to get in, Joe? You guys want to get in the picture? And then I'll have you all go up behind there. Okay. Okay, you want to get closer. Okay.
Great, thanks. And then can I have everyone look at me real quick? All right, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay, if you want to walk up this way and put your board members to like the shade off.
We'll just start out here.
Good to see you. Thanks. Great job. Congratulations. 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 Great job. Good job. Well, it's always great to be able to recognize students who are doing well, regardless of what their area of interest is, but to be able to recognize students who are doing well academically, for those of us who have been in school for our entire lives is really a nice thing to be able to do. So I want to congratulate the staff members who have been working with those students, as well as the entire high school at Amelia, for supporting them in their efforts to do us proud at academic competitions. So thank you.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, Mrs. Cropper?
Ms. Sanborn, would you like to let the students and their families maybe head home since they have homework this
Okay.
evening, or?
If you're here and need
kids
to
already made
leave,
it out.
Kids
this
already
would be
made
a
it
great
out,
time.
maybe?
We thank you for coming this evening.
Please make sure they do their homework.
For some reason, I don't think that's a group that you have to
Probably
remind.
not, probably not the group to worry about, right? Great kids.
Ms. Sanborn, and the rest of the board, tonight you have two sets of minutes on the treasurer's agenda. The first set of minutes are from the regular meeting held March 25th. I respectfully request that you approve the minutes of that meeting as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
We have a motion and second. Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Merchant?
Yes.
Mr. Waldman?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes.
Second set of minutes are from our special meeting, which was held Saturday, April 5th. I respectfully request that you approve the minutes of that meeting as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Sorry.
Tammy? And a second?
I second. Good. I'll second.
All right. Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Mr. Merchant?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Waldman?
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes. Treasurer's business, donations?
Next item on the treasurer's agenda are the donations that the district received during the following month. And as you can see, there's a long list as usual. Glen Estee High School received a $25 gift card to Honey Baked Ham, as well as Longaberger items from Vivian Hale. Graduate Service donated a 2014 senior sweatshirt. Men's Warehouse donated a tuxedo rental. Huntington Learning donated $200 in a gift package, which included quite an array of items that you have listed there. Xavier University donated 2 Xavier University t-shirts. Jackie Testoff and Robert Fair donated $75. Diamond Nails donated $70. Mr. and Mrs. Matt Spangler donated a $25 gift card to Old Navy, Gap. Johnny's Car Wash donated 5 wash tickets, and Marco's Pizza Eastgate donated $140. Those donations, of course, were used for prom, but Glen Estee High School also received a couple of donations for marching band uniforms, and those were very, very generous donations. Michael and Betty Forbes donated $2,500, and the Glen Estee Band Boosters donated $2,040. As you can see, that certainly enhanced the instructional experience and the experience for our high school students at Glen Estee, and we do some sincerely thank those donors, and as always, once you approve these donations, I will make sure that each and every one of them receive a letter from me on your behalf to thank them for their donation. That said, I respectfully request that you approve those donations as listed.
You've heard the recommendations from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? I'll second. Discussion?
The money that was donated for the band uniforms, is that enough to cover replacement of all of the uniforms, or is that to supplement, or what will that be used for, do you know?
That would be to supplement, so that will be replacement uniforms and
The pieces that need to be replaced, or
and-
they have 10 more students that enroll in
Yes,
that program, then that would afford that. Okay.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Walton,
Yes.
and Mr. Merchant.
Yes.
Motion carried. Issue notices of non-renewal. Mrs. Cropper?
The next item is a procedural item that we bring to you every time at this point in the year. The Ohio Revised Code requires that the board issue notices of non-renewal to those staff who we plan to non-renew in the coming year. Those notices must come from the board with my signature on behalf of the board. Again, this is just a procedural resolution, which gives me the authority to issue those notices on your behalf. That said, I respectfully request that you approve this resolution to direct the treasurer to issue notices as required by staff whose contracts are subject to non-renewal.
You've heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion?
There was no list on the agenda of what these non-renewals are? Are they identified already, or are these, or just so that you can do it when it's time?
This is so that I can do it once I get the list from the personnel department and the superintendent approves. So I don't have the list yet. I know that they're still in the process of finalizing those evaluations, and I should have the list by the end of the month.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn.
Yes. Motion carried. Financial statement, bills paid, list, and investment.
Next item on the list are the financial statements for the month and the fiscal year to date ended March 31st, 2014. And as you can see, the district ended the month with a fairly healthy balance, all funds, unencumbered fund balance of $23.8 million. I would like to direct your attention to page 2 of your financial statement, which shows the general fund, which is, of course, is the 5-year forecast fund. Revenues during the month totaled $7.7 million, high cash flow month. Our balance in the general fund at the end of the March is the highest it will be through the end of the year. Reason being, as you can see there, we received $5.4 million from the county. That was our final settlement on real estate taxes, and I'm very pleased to be able to report to you the good news continues. Real estate taxes are up for the second straight year after the 3 previous years being declining years. So that's good news as the economy continues to recover. New construction in our area continues to grow and bring us a little bit more property taxes, because we do know that's the only way property taxes grow, as they're held back by inflation. So a little bit of good news, finally. Expenditures during the month amount to $5.6 million, and as you can see, with 75% of our year passed, we have spent 70% of our budget, which is where we'd expect to be in this point in time. So we are operating within the appropriations and the 5-year forecast that the board has seen and approved. Last page of the financial statements, again, just presents those same expenditures, presents them by function rather than by expense item, should you prefer to look at them in those categories. That said, I respectfully request that you acknowledge and accept the financial statements for the month and the fiscal year to date ended March 31st, 2014.
You have heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion? So move. In a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Yes, having looked over the numbers, I did notice that we spent over $12,000, almost $13,000 on legal fees this past month, and then over the last year, we spent over $100,000. And I was worried about a flat fee exceeding what we were paying on a normal basis, and obviously that's not the case. It seems to be that we're spending more than that by paying directly.
I would agree. I think our legal fees, given all the public records requests we've had recently, has definitely added to our legal fees. I would expect our legal fees to definitely be over what we've paid in the previous years as far as legal fees go. I think one of the dangers, though, as we talk about flat fees, it's important to take a look at what that covers and what it doesn't. And I know that that's certainly something that we've put on the radar to discuss later this summer.
I think to be clear, the proposal that was presented was not a flat fee. There were a number of add-ons that were a part of that. So we're not talking
Carve-outs that
about,
were exclusions from that flat fee.
we're not talking about a true flat fee.
Very important when you analyze those things to make sure you're analyzing apples to apples, oranges to oranges. And that's
several of the things that we've incurred expense on would have been excluded from that flat fee and would have been charged by the hour.
I think that one of the things that concerned me about that flat fee, as I read the contract that we had, was that it excluded labor and employment issues. And in a typical time, that's going to be 80% of what we do. So in a typical year, that would have been a large portion. So, but it is as we go to look at it. It's especially if we think about looking at a flat fee retainer, it's very important to spell out very clearly what that entails and what it doesn't.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Mr. Waldman?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Merchant?
Yes.
Motion carried. Treasurer's comments, Mrs. Cropper?
That concludes the treasurer's report for this evening. Thank
Okay.
you much for your attention.
Superintendent's business, Dr. Klein.
Yes, tonight I'm pleased to bring to the board two reports, information about what the board's engaged in, or what the district's engaged in, to give you an update on where we are with things. This evening, and I apologize to Mr. Van Zant, I told him he was a little higher on the agenda than, I forgot about the treasurer's business, imagine that. I'm pleased to have Mr. Matt Van Zant from the Chamber of Commerce come to present to you around the Great Oaks. If you remember right, early in January, this board named Mr. Van Zant as our representative to the Great Oaks Board. He's been doing a great job in attending meetings, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to come and have him share with you all what he's been doing and what he's learned as a member of the Great Oaks Board. Mr. Van Zant, welcome.
Thank you. Well, board members, let me begin by thanking you for the vote of confidence by appointing me to represent your interest on the Great Oaks School Board. 4 months have flown by. We've had 4 meetings. My attendance is 100%, and I just want to, before I say anything more, reinforce to this board what I knew before I was appointed, and that the Great Oaks operation is something that we can all be proud of in the West Clermont Local Schools District. I've been involved with that organization off and on for over 20 years on some of their advisory councils, and now as your representative to the school board, it's just amazing to see really what goes on a day-to-day operation, and we should be really proud of the work that they do there. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information and some insights that I've picked up in the short 4 months that I've been there. As you may know, Great Oaks was formed nearly 50 years ago, back in the mid-'60s, to provide career and technical education to students. The mission is real simple, to provide quality education, technical programs, and services for our children. It's a fairly sizable operation, about $129 million in net assets. Its annual spending is about $70 million, and those funds come from a variety of sources, two primary sources, grant funding, then also a tax levy. It's amazing to watch that operation run under the governance of 35 board members. So if you've never been to their boardroom, I encourage you to go out there soon, because it's going to go through a remodel. Some of that technology is quite old, but it's a big circular room with 35 members with voting devices, and it's just an amazing thing to observe. It's also supported not just by this 35-member governing board, but the organization also has a number of advisory boards. So there's the Great Oaks Council, which is another position I hold at Great Oaks. We meet about quarterly, and our job is really to develop, update, and maintain programs that are run through the different campuses across the system. There are also at every one of the campuses a Business Partners Council, and these are individuals, again, like me, who 20 years ago I supported some of the work out at Live Oaks up on Buckwheat. Same type of thing, pay attention to what's going on in the classroom, try to make connections with the employers, because they are really the ones that at the end of the day put our children to work, and that's why we're there. Like this organization, Great Oaks is accredited, but not in just the similar ways. So the American Society of Automotive, ASAE, or whatever it is, ASE, along with North Central as part of their accreditations. They have 8 accreditations that were mentioned in a 2012 comprehensive annual financial report. Begun to make friends, and that's really through what also drives the organization, which is a pretty robust committee system. So there are 6 committees, and I don't have them all memorized, so let me read. There's an Administrative and Human Resources Committee. That's not where you put a freshman member, nor do you put them on financial and investments. I don't sit on that, nor policy and planning. We have a Building and Assets Committee, salary and benefits. I, as a freshman member of the board, sit on the Education Program Design and Evaluation Committee. And it's really fascinating, just in this short amount of time, how much we've accomplished, just 4 months. I have some great team members. One gentleman owns a retail store up in the northern part of the district. Another gentleman has a software company in downtown Cincinnati. And then there's a retired executive from Avon with international trade experience. So the Great Oaks Board is made up of a variety of individuals. But I'm really proud to be on the committee with these folks. Finally, let me just say, in the 4 months I've been there, some observations that I have. One, there's a real strong focus on the needs of the employers. And it's evidence in not just what we do with looking at programming, but also through the work of the advisory committees. They're very strong, they're deep into the classroom, and I can tell you from being on an advisory council, many of the employers on that council are hiring these kids. There seems to be a real focus on both efficiency and effectiveness. Curriculum review starts next month. So I have volunteered to go out there one afternoon and meet some of the faculty, I call them faculty, teachers, and I'll learn a little bit more about some of the programs. And it's not for me so much what the program is, but it's really to observe those teachers and to hear what they're doing and what they're saying to try to get our kids in a position where they can get jobs and be self-sufficient. Lastly, and this is sometimes, I guess, the most impressive thing, and that is that there also seems to be a real focus on value. And so there are terms that I've heard over the years, didn't always realize what they meant, but dual credit, articulation agreements, credit transfer, the types of things that go on because of these technical programs are just amazing. I have a report that shows in the margin over 18,000 college credit hours earned by these students. I don't really know what the time frame is, but I can just tell you that seems amazing to me. So they're doing great work. I'll do my best to represent the West Claremont local schools as I attend those meetings and serve on those subcommittee meetings. And at any time, if the board would like me to come back and report out, I'll do that. And with that, I'll answer questions if I'm able.
Any questions?
Sir?
How many students are in the Great Oaks right now?
Oh, good question. I would be guessing, so I don't want to. I think, with adults and young students, I don't want to misquote the numbers, but too soon for me to memorize those numbers. Great question, though.
This has basically replaced the shop in home ec when I was a kid, going to school, correct?
Say that again?
This has replaced the shop and home ec, those kind of things that were on in high school when I was attending.
And they're really now, the terminology has changed. They're
Right.
calling it career and technical. So on the technical side, things that used to be, years ago, automotive was a lot of hand tools. Now it's very technical in nature. But that is indeed what it is. There's some, I don't know if they're allied health occupations, but there are young men and women involved in the healthcare business. So it's a big operation.
And what I would add to that, Mr. Van Zandt, and for the board's knowledge, is that our relationship with Great Oaks has been one that's really provided opportunities for our children. We don't have, nor does any school district really have the resources to be able to put some of these programs in place. So if a young person knows what their career interest or their career path is early on, as early as a sophomore year, they've got that option to go to Great Oaks for their day and experience real instruction around the area that they want to be focused on. And most of those kids, if not all of them, I believe, leave Great Oaks with the professional certification that many folks wait to get when they're out of high school. So it really is a tremendous advantage for our young people, gives them opportunities that we could not provide here, and sets them on their course, certification in hand when they graduate, to be able to enter straight into the workforce with the knowledge and skills they need to be successful. So a great relationship that we have with Great Oaks, as do a lot of school districts in the area. And they do things for our kids that we just can't because of the nature of the business.
I have a report here that is a early report on the estimated number of students that may be attending next fall, and it's in that 3,000 range, and that would be all campuses across the system.
And does that cover all of Claremont County, or includes more than Claremont?
It would be all 35 districts that are supporting the system.
That's Hamilton County, Claremont County,
Right.
probably some Warren County. I'm sorry, 12 counties. I couldn't possibly give you all those names. But yeah, they serve 12 counties and that makes up 35 school districts.
35 districts.
Yeah, but within those 12 counties, there are other vocational schools that some
well.
schools tend to go to. For example, I believe Bethel goes to Grant and some of the other
Correct.
Claremont counties.
Yeah, there's a Warren County Career Center, U.S. Grant, out in Bethel, that serves Bethel Tate and Richmond, Williamsburg, and who am I missing?
Felicity.
Felicity. That's right.
And it's good to hear that you're bringing in the employers to help design what they need, rather than to some person in Ivory Tower, Ohio State or something.
Well, what I've learned just in a short time around curriculum review is if students aren't signing up and if students aren't being employed, disinvestment happens pretty quickly. So the employers want to be in the room and influence what's going on in that classroom, so that, again, we get these kids hired. It's really about employment.
That's good. It's just not everybody's they're not everybody's college material, and this is kind of mirroring what they do in Europe, have done for ages in Europe.
That's correct.
And I appreciate your willingness and interest in working with us and representing us. I could not have thought of a better person to do that. So
Well, thank you. At the Chamber of Commerce, we spend a lot of time recruiting volunteers to help us do the things that we do. And as an employer of 8 employees in the West Claremont schools, I think this is just the right thing to do, is to step up and do something like this. So I'm grateful for the chance. I'll do my best.
Great opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Van Zandt.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Be interesting at some time, if there's interest on the board, to arrange a little field trip to one of the Great Oaks campuses, just to see the kind of things that they're doing. Because I tell you, it's Mr. Lewis, you brought up the old shop classes that many of us sat through during our younger days. This is entirely different. It's amazing what some of those kids leave being able to do. So great program.
Yeah, I know my stepdaughter left similar things up in Clark County with the cosmetology license. So.
Right. And quite honestly, if they know where they're headed career-wise, why not get them engaged on that as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
So. Our second presentation tonight is an update on our virtual academy. We've been talking about the West Claremont Virtual Academy for the last year or so. And in fact, we have been working and trying to keep up with the interests that we have from our students as far as their involvement in the program. So I've asked Laura Nazarene, our Director of Student Services, and Brian Wallace, who's coordinating the Virtual Academy, to give us a little bit of an update this evening about what's going on with the Virtual Academy and where we see ourselves heading down the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klein. President Sanborn, members of the board, thanks for having us here tonight. We're here to talk to you a little bit about West Claremont Virtual Schools and what the changes have happened since you have voted to support and hire additional people. So currently right now, West Claremont currently serves 152 full-time virtual students. In addition, 24 students have already graduated. As of today, that's 25. In a couple weeks, it'll probably be 30. And then by the end of the school year, we'll probably have 40 students graduate from our virtual school. The virtual classroom at both high schools also serves as a credit recovery hub, serving up to 5 students per class bell, 45 totally currently in this capacity. And what that means is students kind of rotate during their schedule. They have an open bell, so they'll come into the virtual academy and they'll work on some credit recovery, working on specific classes. A little bit about our history. In 2012-13, we had 2 full-time virtual school staff members that were cut, and this resulted in dropping enrollment. Because of that, the board voted in for us to hire two full-time paraprofessionals for the 2013-14 school year, and because of that, the enrollment has increased from 48 to 152 students. I believe that virtual school has met its objective of keeping kids enrolled in the district, and if you go to the next slide, we'll show you how much. So looking at Amelia High School, we've gone from 21 students to last year at this time to 79 students this year at this time. In Gladysy High School, we've gone from 27 students last year at this time to 73 students this year, a total of 152 students, so we've increased 104 students. If you look at our credit recovery has gone down because we are putting kids in virtual full-time and they are graduating and becoming credit efficient, so they no longer need the credit recovery portion of our program. Full-time students who previously attended or voiced that they were considering attending another school, that was 37 students recovered. And I know Dr. Klein came back to you in the fall and said, you know, we really need to look at this. We need to stop the hemorrhage, I think was the words that he used, of our students who were leaving our school system. So we recouped 37 kids and kept them into our school system. They could either have gone out to a K-12 program, a virtual program somewhere else, or they could have been dropouts. So that's pretty satisfying, I think. The board also voted to eliminate fees for full-time virtual students and principal-assigned credit recovery. This enables students to access our program much easier. We also created awareness through counselors, secretaries, principals, parent communication, and a web presence about the new virtual academy and how we were taking students in. We also opened virtual credit recovery, which we only served in our past to 11th and 12th graders. We're now serving 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. We also have used a little bit about credit recovery for some of our 8th grade students who maybe had some behavioral issues or were some students who unfortunately have been expelled, and then just sitting at home and not working on programming, they've been able to access some of our credit recovery programs. We've also streamlined the application process for parents on the West Claremont website. You can go in, you can click on it, you can fill out your application, and you can send it in to be approved. We also have upgraded our computers, our monitoring systems, and I'm going to let Brian talk about that because he's a tech guy and he knows way more than I do about that.
Yeah, we have upgraded. Working with Matt White, our tech coordinator, we've replaced 60 computers this year with refurbished computers. Mostly the kids just need to get on a website, but the computers we had were old and slow, which made it frustrating for them. We're in the process of improving the monitors that they're reading off of as well. And we also purchased monitoring software so we can restrict and control what they can get to. So instead of having a constant battle where they are going on the web, which we know there are many amazing things to find on the web, and they were finding them, we can control what websites they can go to, and we can switch that on and off at any time we want. So that helps tremendously in the classroom. So the kids have a better experience and learn more.
So if you turn to the next slide, it kind of gives you an overall about our expenditures of the virtual program, our teachers, our paraprofessionals, computers, monitors, Apex licensures. And the cost of the program this year has been $350,000. When you look at the number of kids that we have recouped or recovered into that program, looking at their average daily membership, which is 2,400, we have brought in $364,800. That being said, the expenditures covered plus the students coming in, we're still in the green at $104,450 this year. So I feel like the program with your support has been a huge success. Kids are doing a great job. Our teachers are doing a great job. The parapros that you allowed us to hire are doing a great job. We've been able to expand the program. This summer we're going to look at, with the teaching and learning department, maybe even looking at program Apex licensures for our middle school students. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. I don't know if the board has any questions about the virtual program. I know some of these things happened before this board took seats, but I thought it was important that we bring everybody up to speed on what we're doing with virtual and the fact that by retaining students, and we've talked about this, by retaining students in the district using this format, we've been able to actually come in revenue-wise well over what we have to spend to make the program run. So I think it's certainly been a win-win for everybody.
And while it's not ideal situation, it's much better than having dropouts and having them not graduate. I think it's great.
Yes, working with the virtual students, I would agree. Ideally, all of them would be in a typical traditional classroom or at Great Oaks, but these are students who, many of these students would not graduate without the virtual program.
Yep.
And these kids who are graduating are kids who would have dropped out, so we're changing their lives.
Excellent.
Well, I would have to say I really appreciate the work that these folks have done on this because, for us to pull back in 37 kids who had already gone out and made arrangements somewhere else, those are kids that actually have returned to us. And my frustration going into all this was, we've got a virtual program here. Why are kids leaving us to go to virtual programs other places? And so they've done an outstanding job through marketing, through talking with kids, having a lot of conversations. I know you spent a lot of time talking to people, but to keep those kids with us, with one of our teachers, enhances the ability for students to be able to graduate, whether it's from the virtual academy or one of our two high schools. So very well expended monies and resources on getting our kids over the line.
Apex, that's the software we're using? Or?
Apex is the software we're using. It's web-based. Our kids log into an internet site, and the curriculum is there. The kids work through a series of lessons and take quizzes. They have to earn their way through the software. They have maybe in a semester class, they may have 40 lessons to go through. And at the end of each lesson is a quiz, and they must score at least 60% on each quiz to progress through and pass the course. So they have to work their way through it. It's not an easy thing.
And the software allows the teachers or the paraprofessionals to monitor everything they're doing in real time, and they can see.
Absolutely. The software allows myself and Mrs. Spangler, one of the teachers is here tonight, who's done a fabulous job this year, and Mr. Scott over at Amelia and the paraprofessionals. We can see every time the kid logs in, when they log off, how many quizzes they have taken, how many times they took the quiz. We see everything they do on the software.
I just think we should note too that it's not just a software program that goes into our program, that we have outstanding teachers and paraprofessionals that are sitting side by side and working with students, not just through academic issues and technical issues, but all with some social issues and supporting them and encouraging them that they can do it, they can finish. So there's a real human component to our virtual academy.
Yes, having the right teachers in there is a huge, huge difference. The numbers would not look like this if we didn't have the right people in there.
this is the way that, this isn't the average run-of-the-mill student that's going in there. These tend to be the ones that we're going to lose otherwise.
Correct.
Yes.
We should be expanding this to availability to all students. I mean, if you'll study some of the other school districts that are succeeding very well, there's one in Austin, Texas. It's called Acton Academy after Lord Acton, that these kids at sixth grade are being able to pass the high school stuff because it's blended. It's this kind of, you're online and the teacher can pull you aside and things like this. I mean, there's the school in LA, KIPP, that is 2 blocks from where Rodney King riots started. They're all minority kids and they're the best school in the
Yeah,
city.
we have opened it up quite a bit
Yeah,
this
it's
year.
not just our struggling learners.
A few years ago, it was just for the kids who really couldn't deal with being in a classroom, but we have quite a variety of students this year. By opening up the requirements for being in there, we have some pretty amazing students in there.
Yeah, last year I heard that there was a couple students that, because of the change in laws, and that they found themselves a credit short for graduation.
Right.
And they were like, I don't want to give up a AP chemistry to take a U.S. history class. So what they did was they took both classes, and one
Right.
was through the APEX program. So good for them for wanting to have such a robust schedule and add to it with the additional requirements
Yeah.
to get that diploma.
We have, well, at the time we did the report, there were 152. We've added since then. And there are 152 different stories.
And
They're all
oftentimes
amazing different stories.
you'll have students who will come from or back from other virtual academies and will be credit deficient. And then they'll be in our general education setting, but they'll be one of the hubs that they'll rotate through so they become credit efficient. So we're dealing with a wide variety of kids. It's not just students that, are struggling in the general education setting. We have opened it up to our general ed population.
Okay.
Keep up the good work.
Yes.
It's good
Thanks.
stuff.
Exciting stuff. Thank you both very
you.
much. Appreciate it.
Mrs. Nesrine, thank you, Mr. Wallace.
We move now to some business items under 6.03, approved new and revised bylaws and new and revised board policies. If you remember correctly, back in March, the policy committee met to go through the policies that were then presented to the board mid-March for your consideration. We did not take action on them on the 5th during our special meeting, but this evening is time to approve those. With the boards talking with the president, vice president, we clustered all of those policies, hearing no concerns about any of them prior to now. We clumped all of them under one approval motion this evening. So with that being said, I'd like to recommend that the board approve the policies and change new and revised bylaws and new and revised board policies as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Dr. Klein. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
Yes.
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. The next item under business is the approval of school fees for 2014-2015. I would like to say before we get to a motion or a recommendation on these, we've been working with our building principals pretty extensively to see what we can do about either maintaining school fees as they exist or possibly reducing those. Just a piece of information, school fees are approved and are paid for by the parents for items that are what we would call consumables in the classroom. These are things that those individual students use up over the course of that particular class that they're in. A great example of this would be a workbook. If we have a Spanish workbook, that student uses that workbook throughout the year. We can't reuse that workbook for another student the next year. So state law allows us to have school fees approved to pay for those consumable pieces. You'll notice on the list, I've got several that have been reduced. As we move forward, some of the higher priced fees that are on here are listed with AP courses, advanced placement courses. Those include the test that students take at the end of the year, actually early to mid-May is when those tests take place. That includes the fees that go to the College Board for the tests, the AP test that they take towards the end of the school year. We also have included on here the high school and middle school athletic fees, which the board has discussed in the past, reducing those to $250 per activity. So those I guess, have already been approved, but I put it back on the fee list so we have all of it in one place. So that being said, I'd like to request that the board approve the school fees for the 2014-2015 school year as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Dr. Klein. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
Yes.
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Next piece of business under personnel, we have several retirements and resignations that I'd like to make you aware of. We've accepted 5 since the last business meeting. I'd like to draw your attention to Vicki Galloway. She's been a cafeteria manager at Willowville. She's completed 28 years with our school district. And Cheryl Thompson, who's an elementary teacher at Merwin Elementary, is retiring at the end of this year after 30 years of service to West Claremont. We certainly appreciate all of those individuals' hard work and efforts on behalf of our children. Under personnel recommendations this evening, several items. Under employment, certificated personnel, we have 6 individuals that the personnel office, HR office, has deemed the A team. Those are the art, music, and PE teachers that we have discussed in the past, is adding those individuals back, or those programs back, to our elementary schools starting with the new school year. Under letter B and C, we have supplemental assignments, and those are for coaching positions throughout the district. Some cafeteria worker substitutes, a list of school volunteers, and of course we appreciate their efforts in coming in and helping in our buildings. And last but not least, we have the approval of some stipends. These stipends are for teacher leaders in each of our buildings. If we approved at the end of last year a group of those folks. A lot of these folks are from in Summerside Elementary, where we didn't have a principal in place and hadn't been there to get to know these folks. So this is the remaining batch of those teachers who are working as instructional support leaders. All those monies come out of title funds, so they're not directly out of our general fund. So with that being said, I'd like to request approval of the personnel items and agenda as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Dr. Klein. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second. Discussion?
Yes, I don't know why we need to hire PE teachers with 5 years or better of experience. I still don't, your explanation was not satisfactory to me. It's we should fight. We're not Indian Hill, we're a struggling school district, and to hire a PE teacher for elementary is with that much experience is kind of, I would rather have somebody younger. And you said we hadn't set any kind of guidelines. Well, I think that's something we should discuss would be guidelines. I don't see any need to hire, especially at the elementary level, somebody with all that experience. And to be paying that much and starting that high on the salary scale already.
Any other questions, or I'll respond to that. I just don't know if there were any other questions. As I discussed today, and I sent to the board via email this morning, early afternoon, we are about trying to find the best quality people that we can find for these positions. These are going to be challenging positions as we move into the new year, with these folks rotating amongst 4 buildings and dealing with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. We did try to come up with a blended team, because they're going to probably more than likely move through as a team, where we have some folks who have some more experience and can provide some leadership with each one of those teams. And as you can see on the list, we also have some folks that are straight out of college with no experience. Our guidelines, the state guidelines, is that if we hire someone with experience, we have to give them a minimum of 5 years. If I'm remembering right from my email this morning or this afternoon, the 2 teachers that are being given 5 years on this recommendation are teachers who actually have, I believe, 8 and 9 years. Is that correct? 17 total years of experience. So while I understand the concern around that, we also need to make sure that we got quality people in our buildings with our kids. And this is going to present a unique challenge as we work our way back into offering some art, music, and PE for our youngsters at the elementary level. So I would again respectfully request that the board approve the recommendations as presented.
You heard the recommendations from Dr. Klein. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
We have a motion.
Oh, I was just saying.
We have a motion. We were in the discussion
I'm sorry.
portion.
It's okay.
From my perspective, I appreciate that music and art is more structured, and you have a lot of children, but they have designated responsibilities. Where PE, you have the potential for a large group of children to be out of control. So I appreciate the fact that, did I say that? Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you have experienced teachers that know how to handle a larger group of children, that this is not their first rodeo, that they're going to be able to take control in a manner that we would expect them to be able to control. So I appreciate that they have experience.
Thank you.
Any other suggestions, comments? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper.
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
No.
Motion carried.
We have a couple of other,
Superintendent's
I'm sorry, I
comments?
keep jumping in. We have a couple of other pieces of business that I want to work through with the board this evening. First has to do with extended day in K+, the programming we've been talking about with our elementary schools in conjunction with Child Focus. As of this afternoon, we have approximately 65 students that have pre-registered for K+. That represents about 10% of our anticipated kindergarten registration. We have about 162 students registered for extended day district-wide, and that represents about 4% of our eligible elementary population. Most of the buildings are to the point of having adequate numbers to be able to sustain one unit of before and after school care. We have one building that's a little bit behind on that, and they're continuing to work on getting numbers up. Enrollment in K+ has not met the minimum expectation which is a minimum of 14 youngsters. In most of our buildings, we're currently right now ahead of where we normally are with kindergarten registration. Usually we're already starting to get a little panicky because we're not getting people to come in and register their kindergartners. But Student Services has shared with me several times that we're kind of ahead of where we normally are this time of year, which is great. That's good news. We're attracting kids earlier on. We do expect those K+ numbers to go up as folks start thinking about kindergarten, thinking about next school year and what they want to do with their youngster. Of course, as the board knows, and I've made no hesitation about stating publicly, if I had my druthers, we'd have all day, every day kindergarten for every child. But the district is not in a position financial to be able to support that. Do want to remind folks as well that we have had latchkey or extended day programs in several of our buildings in the past. Those went by the wayside as the buildings got closed down at 4 o'clock, et cetera. And so we're really kind of reinstating programming that we had as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. Ultimately, there were some concerns raised about the district and not taking bids for service providers. We are not, as a district, contracting with Child Focus. We're providing space like we would through a normal process for folks who want to use our buildings. The parents are contracting with Child Focus, and so consequently, as a result, we don't have anything to gather bids on because we're not going to be the person or the entity that's going to be paying that. Child Focus does already provide programming and services in many of our buildings. Head Start is an example, counseling is an example, dealing with a variety of different issues. So it really is an extension of what they're already doing in our schools. They are a nonprofit organization, and quite honestly, I was very interested in that because it was a means to control costs for our parents. And as we move forward, I think that's very important that we are affordable. This program is affordable for parents and the families. Parents and principals continue to request that we have those services returned, the extended day services, due largely to the lack of transportation and the timing issues with parents being able to work or needing to work and still getting their child to school as is required. This program does meet the needs of our parents and our students. And that being said, that meets the needs of a group of our parents and students. There are still parents and students who need care 365 days a year, or whether there's a snow day or not, or summertime. And those parents, quite honestly, I have to say, need to continue to work with the daycare centers or the arrangements that they've got currently. As we move forward, I've talked to several and been exchanging emails with several local daycare centers, and I talked with a few tonight. We're going to set up a meeting with our staff and with several of those daycare center officials to talk through the issues and the concerns that we've got on both sides. Certainly, our goal is not to put anybody out of business. Our goal, like theirs, is to provide services that our parents and children need in the school district. So, we have the same goal. It's just how do we get there? I really believe that the folks that we're attracting with this particular model is maybe not the same group of folks that daycares are attracting, because they can offer summer care, they can offer care in a variety of different ways that we simply can't and won't. So I just want to give the board a little bit of an update. I'm going to contact folks tomorrow. We'll get together probably sometime the end of this week, beginning of next, sit down and talk through the issues and concerns that the daycare folks have. I'm encouraged by the number of families that are signing up. It tells me that there is a need there, a vacuum that we need to fill. And so I think we're on the right track. We just need to work through some of those issues that have been presented to us. And I'll certainly be glad to do that as we move forward this coming week. I don't know if there are any other questions or concerns, comments.
Are you reaching out to all daycare facilities or just those that have expressed concerns?
We'll probably start with the ones that have expressed concerns, but certainly I'll sit down and talk with anybody, anytime, anywhere to talk about the issues that they may have.
I want people to get their feelings
I
heard
understand.
because we've made this change,
Right.
and we're talking to some, but not all.
Correct.
So we need to probably do a
Yeah.
best effort to talk to as many.
I don't know that we'll do that all in one sitting. We'll probably spread that out depending on the numbers, but.
The other question I had was regarding a comment that you made regarding the K+, that there was a few buildings that were falling short on enrollment.
Yeah.
Instead of not offering that at that building, would those families be offered maybe a transfer to another building that would not be so far away from their home? That may be able to accommodate that?
That is an option,
Okay.
yes. We really anticipate with the K+, and we know how this kindergarten registration goes. I'm thrilled that we're further along with that than we normally are in a given year, and I'm hopeful that that's a sign that we're going to be able to have more of our kindergartners in West Claremont. That being said, we know that folks run all the way up into August as they register their kindergartners. And so I'm not overly concerned about the enrollment with that right now, because I think it will pick up. Enrollment's better at this point in the year, but it's not where it will be by the time we start school. But we've got Plan B and C in place so that we can respond to that. Certainly if parents want their child to have that full day experience, we'll work with them to try to find a way to make that happen.
And if for some reason we can't accommodate that, we're not going to tell them on August the 10th
No.
that on August 11th, their child's now going to a different
Right.
building and now they have to make other arrangements. We're going
We'll try to make
ample
those.
notice.
We'll try to make those arrangements as quickly as we can. We are somewhat at the mercy of parents enrolling, and so we're encouraging and we're talking now about how do we get out there and encourage parents of potential kindergartners to get in and get signed up now so that we have a better assessment of what the numbers look like. I think this will be an anomaly year as well, because once folks know about the program and they know it's part, I think that will, in a second year, not make it as tenuous as it is right now. But we're working through it, and we're going to continue to push and try to get kindergarten families in here to get them registered as quickly as we can.
Well, I believe the daycare providers do have a legitimate complaint about that. It seems to be putting them in an unfair advantage in dealing with this. And even though it's not costing the parents as much, it's costing somebody something, because we're subsidizing child focus with taxpayer dollars somewhere along the line. So, I think free markets should work here, and we ought to, I'm not so certain that this is something we really need to be doing, be involved in childcare to start with. I mean, most of them are surviving now by arranging transportation from the schools for those children that they have after school. I think this is potentially undercutting their business, and the slim margins they're working on may be the difference between sinking or swimming. And it would be interesting to have to get the results of your conversations with them, because I think that, in a free market economy, we should stop looking to the government for everything, and that's child focus is basically government.
I know from a parent's perspective, I've heard from several families that have 4th and 5th graders next year. And they like the option of their child staying at that school because the child feels, I'm too old to go to daycare, but they're willing to stay home, stay at school a little bit longer, where mom's not saying, do I allow them to walk home by themselves, stay by themselves, where I'm a little uncomfortable with that, or let them stay at school. So it's a good option for several people that the daycares wouldn't have got otherwise.
Well, again, we're responding to what folks have asked us about. And again, it is not an unusual program for school districts to be connected to. I would think that if I still had youngsters, which I don't, but if I were to still have youngsters, them being able to stay after school until I could get them from work would be an advantage, as opposed to moving them around and going to other places. That being said, we're providing choice to families at no expense to the district anyhow. We're providing choice to those folks, and certainly want to make it affordable for some of our families who just can't afford reasonable daycare.
Any other discussion? Public
Okay.
comments, we don't have anything else in that area?
Okay, thank you. We will go ahead then, if we could. If you remember right, on the 5th of April, we were discussing the performance audit review, and I wanted to complete that this evening as promised. The good news is the remaining items I don't think won't take us too terribly long to work our way through. One of the issues that was presented was transportation oversight and looking at the cost of transportation. We did, going into this school year, reduce 4 routes. The audit savings projected that at being $210,000, and actually it was $280,000 when it all came down to it. This was an area that, and I mentioned, I think in the last time we were discussing this was a recommendation that we were working very closely with the auditor who was focused on transportation. And as a result of that, we were able to implement some of those changes prior to the audit coming out. If you remember, the audit actually came out in December, so we would have missed those savings had we not been working hand in hand with the auditors while they were here. We are currently working with Peterman directly to look at our contract as it stands right now. Our goal is, of course, to increase services and not increase price, if anything, reduce price. But Mr. Dyer is working very hard with the folks from Peterman, and I expect that we'll be sitting down here soon to talk more about that, and certainly we'll update the board as we move forward. My goal has always been to, and I've said this multiple times, I'd love to return transportation for everyone, but it is, next to personnel, one of the biggest expenses that we have. So I want to give the board just a little bit of an update. We are working with Peterman right now to see if we can modify that contract in any way. Currently, Mr. Dyer, Director of Operations, does oversee and monitor transportation efficiencies, and I know he's working with those folks on a daily basis to make sure that we are getting the most for what we're paying on that contract. The next piece was increased efficiency in special needs transportation. We did, again, work with the auditor that was working on transportation around this. Going into the 2013-14 school year, we were able to reduce bus aids on several of the routes that we were running. That saved the district approximately $94,500 going into 13-14. I will say that we did have a situation earlier in the year where special needs got to the point where we needed to put an aid back on a bus, and we've always tried to maintain that flexibility in case we need it. If we really need it and there's a safety issue involved, then certainly we don't want to go without. But going into the year, we had set aside $94,500. That number is a little bit lower as the years progressed. Ensure expenditures are charged to appropriate funds was another recommendation. That focused primarily on food services and the staff that works in that department, as well as athletic directors. I know that Mrs. Cropper has made some adjustments in monies that come out of general fund versus monies that come out of specific accounts tied to those two areas. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to share.
No, just one thing to keep in mind. They felt that this was a best practice. I want to just make sure I clarify the fact that we weren't breaking any law or anything that the auditor wants us to do. It's just a best practice in the industry to match expenditures to revenues. We have had our food service director paid out of the general fund since the dawn of time in this district. But the auditors feel that it would be best to put that cost in 006, so we have moved our food service director to 006. Keep in mind, going forward, we do have a healthy balance in 006, and it shouldn't bother it in the near term, but it will certainly draw that balance down quicker. The athletic directors are a little bit of a different piece there. Most school districts do pay their athletic directors out of the general fund as we did, but they felt that since our fees were so high and we did have fees intended to cover the coaches, which is unlike most school districts, that we should move the athletic directors there. We had quite a bit of discussion over that because our athletic directors have more responsibility than just being an athletic director. So we did agree with them that there would be a percentage breakdown, and some of the athletic directors' job functions, those which involve supervising students during the day, and those duties that if not for the athletic director, we would have to have a supervisor perform, will be charged to a supervisory function. And the portion of the athletic director's compensation that is only athletics will be moved to the 300 fund. But keep in mind, that will make the transfer larger. Neither one of these saves any money. It's just simply what pot of we're taking it out of.
What is the percentage on the athletic director?
We're actually looking at a 60-40 breakdown. So 60% to supervisory, 40% to athletic directors. And we make that based upon the determination that if the we do have to send administrators to all of our sports events out to other school districts. And if we were not sending the ADs, we would have to send another supervisor. And in fact, when there's multiple events, other supervisors do go and cover the event.
Thank you. The next slide talks about eliminating general fund transfers to the athletic fund. That has to do with pay to participate fees. And as the board remembered, and we just reconfirmed this evening, we have lowered those fees. So in this case, we're not following the advice of the auditor. We will, as we've discussed, have to take some of those fees out of, or some of that money out of general fund to be able to lower those fees as determined earlier. One of the suggestions that they brought up as well was to update student enrollment projections. And this goes right in line with what we've all been talking about as far as programming and options for our families here in West Claremont. This is not a complete timeline out. The Ohio Facilities Construction Commission did this enrollment projection for us free of charge as part of the OFCC process. And so it is telling about where we are, but I did want to take just a moment to explain a couple of things. As you can see, in 2010-11, we had roughly 9,000 young people attending schools. Now, 2013-14, we're almost down to 8,000, which is a pretty significant change over the course of several years. And this board and the prior board wisely determined that part of that has been the fact that we have not had the kind of educational experience that our families want for their children. In fact, the monitor that comes down from Columbus and has talked with Mrs. Cropper multiple times about the fact that the reductions that we've made in the programs that we've cut are now a detriment as far as us keeping kids and keeping the revenue stream healthy as we move forward. And that's quite honestly why we're making doing a lot of the things that we're doing as we move into next school year. Another piece that I need to share with us, and I had a little go-around with the person who did the study, and I wouldn't say go-around, we had a discussion. My concern was that as she was working through this, they were continuing to account for that decline that's been represented over the last 3 years. And when you see 3 years of declining enrollment, that's the trend, and we expected that to continue to move down. What I did learn from that conversation was that, and my argument, of course, was we're doing all of these things to try to turn that trajectory north again. And what I got from the OFCC in those conversations was that if we unroll that over the course of the next month or so, if that study we need to take another look at that study, they will do that. And so my hope is that we'll be able to at least shift that trajectory a bit so that we don't see that steady decline well into the future. But it was great information to have. They gave us a lot more detail, and I've shared that report with the board prior to tonight. But a lot of good information in there about enrollment trends and where we're headed. Next slide had to do with implementing a fuel reconciliation policy. We have always reconciled the invoice for the fuel to the fuel used. One of the issues that we had in moving further with that fuel reconciliation practice was that the pumps at our transportation center did not allow us to track that like we should have. And one of the things that we did over the winter was that we've replaced those pumps so that they're more up to date, and we'll be able to better track that information as we move forward. And as I've shared, we continue to work with Peterman not only on routes, the number of routes and the money that we're spending for the routes that we have, but also to make smart routes, lay out smart routes that will conserve fuel as much as possible. So over the course of the 5th and then tonight, we've walked through the performance audit. That was one of the things that was on the board's priority list. As you can see, we already made some changes before the audit even was published, and we continue to look at the areas that they have shared in the performance audit as areas for continued work as far as reducing expenditures and hopefully increasing revenues. So I don't know if there's any questions about any of those items we discussed tonight. Again, it was intended to be a review of the performance audit and kind of an update on where we are with moving forward with those recommendations.
Any discussion?
You had mentioned working with Peterman to make sure that we had route efficiencies.
Yes.
One thing that I've heard from a lot of people is that they see a lot of individual stops, picking up one child, going 2 doors down, picking up another child, 2 doors down, picking up. Are they looking at consolidation of stops as well to be more efficient?
That's one of the options that we can look at. What I would say about that is, we need to continue to keep an eye on safety. In some parts of our community, we don't have sidewalks. The intersections are not safe intersections, et cetera. And so as we look at those things, all of that has to be taken into consideration as well. I don't personally have an issue with clustering stops as long as we can make sure that they're safely clustered stops for kids. But that'll be part of the conversations that we're having with them here in the next couple of weeks.
Any other discussion?
Okay. Last but not least, I promise this is the last piece of superintendent's business tonight. One of the things that we did not get through on the 5th, because we had a lot of great conversation about other things, were additional priorities for 2014. And just real quick, I wanted to give you, and I gave you another copy of the priorities at your seat tonight. We talked about add-backs, all-day, everyday kindergarten, which our response has been K+, art, music, and PE, which we took action on tonight. We're in the midst of negotiating with transportation and working to maintain specialized programming. Those were the 4 items under add-backs for this coming school year. We are working through registration numbers at our high schools right now, and we're working hard to preserve those specialized programs, provided we have ample enrollment. We're keeping a very close eye on that as we move forward. Under curriculum and student performance, that was another area that we clustered things in, 3rd grade guarantee. I can report tonight that as a result of us using MAP testing, and we approved that probably a year ago, and we're using that throughout the year, gives us an indication of where kids are, kind of benchmark them throughout the year. We are seeing the MAP test in reading as one of the indicators we can use to check a child off as having passed the 3rd grade reading guarantee. And I'm very pleased to say that we're seeing those numbers as a result of the last round of MAP testing we've done. We're seeing significant numbers of our students who passed at the level they needed to on the MAP test. So they, in effect, have passed the 3rd grade reading guarantee. OAAs, the state test, is coming up here in a couple of weeks. And so we'll hopefully knock off another batch of those students who haven't passed that reading test. And I know the curriculum department right now is working on some summer intervention because we have an opportunity for kids to retest in the summer. Working on some intervention opportunities for kids who, even at the end of this school year, maybe haven't passed that test. So we are making significant progress, I would guess, on making sure that those kids pass the third grade reading guarantee and are retained for at least part of their day next school year. Overall academic performance, we won't know the results of that really until summertime, but as I mentioned, ongoing assessments that we've been doing have shown good progress with our students at all grade levels. How are you teaching college readiness? We'll be talking about that in June, scheduled for, I think, our June 7th meeting, as well as curriculum tests, or curriculum, high graduation tests, minimum standards, Common Core, et cetera. Performance evaluations for teachers, that currently is in state law, and there's not a lot we can do about that particular piece. We are working through the final parts of OTES, the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. As a matter of fact, all of the teachers have to be handed a copy of their final evaluation by May 10th. At that point, we'll have a better understanding of how that piece has impacted teacher ratings, and certainly we'll share that information with the board once it's finalized.
What is that acronym SGM?
Student growth measures. Student growth measures, and that comes through the testing that has yet to happen in some cases. There are other things, but the testing is a big piece of that. Cost-saving areas, we've talked about insurance. We've taken finished our relook at the performance audit. Facilities master plan, as I've shared with the board, we expect to start those presentations at our next board meeting, and we've got that plugged into the agenda for the next 3 meetings. The state will want us to come up with some solutions and some answers for them prior to the end of the spring. So we'll dig into that at our next meeting. We're continuing to look at consortium options that we may have. Outside service, we continue to analyze that as we go. I've mentioned we're talking about transportation. I know there's been an interest in looking at attorneys and law firms. Those are things that we'll do as we move forward as well. And then using ESC to do some contracting out. One of the cost savings we're doing this year as it relates to ESC is, if you remember, Tanny McGregor resigned to go do some private consulting, and we've been supplementing, during her absence, we've been supplementing some of the work that needs to be done in curriculum through the Hamilton County ESC. That has saved us some money, but that's not something we can continue to do because we really need a person doing that job, and we're kind of filling the gaps with the folks from ESC, but we are able to save a little bit of money with them. And under other relationships with community, teachers, employees, we continue to work on that. Legislative liaison, probably something the board needs to talk about again. Somebody to focus on the state issues and what's going on in Columbus. Under safety, gun-free zones, that's scheduled for June 9th. And under board development, board retreat, I'd at some point be interested in the board's thoughts about doing more of that work as we move forward. So those are the what was on our original list. Right now, I got to tell you, the staff's plates are full. And as we get into the final throes of the school year, we're really not going to be able to take on any more than what we've had on our plates as of now. But we also want to look forward and look at, okay, what's next and what do we need to start getting ourselves organized for. This board's going to be very busy between now and the end of this school year, particularly with the facilities plan. We will, I guess at this point then, I would be interested in hearing from board members about priorities that the individuals have beyond the ones that we've been working on since February 1st when we first did this initial list. So with permission of the board, I think we can probably just go around like we did the last time. If there's something that you'd like to put on the list, share that, and then we can take that list back and see how we can cobble it together and make sense of it as we move forward. Is that an acceptable approach?
It is.
Okay, great. So if that's all right, Mr. Merchant, you're sitting right by me. Would you mind going first? Do you have something you'd like to add?
You've covered some of the issues that we talked about with regards to the cost expenditures and the vetting of law firms and other vendors. And I'm glad to see that that's back on the list and that we can go forward with that.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sanborn?
Business Advisory Group.
Okay. And I assume that's establishing one, using them as a resource. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Using the Claremont County Chamber of Commerce.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Brinkman?
I think that our original list was pretty inclusive.
Okay. I can say it certainly kept us busy.
I think there's some,
quite a bit of there.
some hot topics that I think are very important
Yeah, thank you.
to be focused on.
Mr. Waldman, anything?
No, I would agree with Mrs. Brinkman that there's still a number of things on here that are certainly hot topics and a lot of things to talk about yet. I think once we get through this, it'll be an opportunity to look at round 2.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lewis?
I don't see anything we need to add to this, but for the benefit of those who do not know, the performance grades that the schools have been getting through the years are graded on a tremendous curve. And we've not been doing, most of the schools in Ohio, we've not been doing a good job, and we annually lower the standards to make us look better. Currently, depending on the subject, between math and English, your student can get a passing grade, your school district can get a passing grade if 75% of the students get at least 32% right, or up to 57% right. Those are the bare minimums, and if 75% of the students can get, I believe it's math, if they can get 32% right in math, the school's proficient. So, I'm sorry, we're not playing baseball here. If they can't make change at McDonald's, how are we surviving? And we need to look more, and Common Core is going to make it even worse, and we really have to look at ways to get around Common Core. And it
Well,
can be done.
and we have talked about, and I think that's slated for the June 7th Saturday work session, special meeting. That is a work session. But we'll have curriculum here, and hopefully we'll have some of the results from this school year back that we can share at that point. Don't know exactly if we'll have all of them back, but that'll be a great opportunity to talk about curriculum and where we're headed, what the state's expectations are, and all the parameters around curriculum. But no doubt about the fact that what we're teaching and how we're teaching it is critically important. And that is speaks to the success of the school district as a whole.
And we're still stuck in the 1800s, 20 to 30 students in a classroom with a lecturer, and the kids aren't learning that way these days.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm watching the 2-year-olds, in fact, I was at the house with one of our church members today, and the 2-year-olds playing on daddy's iPhone. And I'm seeing these kids that are, at 2, they're being able to manage their way through whatever they want to get to the games or whatever they're doing on the iPhone. And we've got them sitting there listening to a lecture that is,
Well, and what I would say in response to that is that we'll make sure on June 7th that we're sharing all the things that are going on in our classrooms, because I'll be honest with you, our teachers have grown significantly, and we're doing a lot of different things in classrooms than what has happened even a decade ago. And so I think the 7th will give us an opportunity to share all the great things that are going on in West Claremont, because there have been a lot of changes, and school right now is not what school was. And is it something that will ever reach the pinnacle and reach the goal? Probably not, because we need to continue to push and make sure that our kids are prepared for the world that they're going to face. And I've said that, for years. We can't prepare our children for the worlds that we went into, because it's dramatically different, the world and the challenge that they're going to face when they leave high school and move on to whatever they choose to do with their lives. So we've spent a lot of time and energy on focusing on how do we reinvent education in West Claremont? How do we make it relevant to the needs of our children? How do we look at it differently? And, Virtual Academy is a great example of that. And I'm so pleased to see that investment that the school district has made is paying dividends for our youngsters. Is it exactly maybe what we want? Well, maybe exactly what that kid needs. And that's really where we need to be meeting our learners at. And so I'm kind of excited, quite honestly, about the conversation on June 7th. I wish we could get to it before then, but we have to do the facility. There's a timeline on the facilities piece that's going to be there's a hard line there that we have to have that done. But I'm anxious to get to that conversation around what we do in our classrooms and how it's being done, because that is, quite honestly, our core business. And if we're going to be serious about moving kids forward, then we need to focus on that intently. So.
And that facilities piece is going to be a big issue.
It is, and quite honestly, I can't guarantee you that we're not going to have to schedule some additional meetings, and possibly including some community forums that will have to get scheduled in the month of April and May. It's going to be a very busy time. Mm-hmm. Very busy time. Is there anything else anybody would like to add to the list? We made it one time through and got a few items, but I think most of those were things that we had already talked about looking at as we move forward. I do have to say, I really, and I want to applaud this board for going through and placing the initial list of priorities on the agenda. I think the administrative team has spent a lot of time and energy working on getting answers and providing information to the board. And I'm really very pleased with how much progress we've made since February 1st. When you think about all the things that have been accomplished, it's been due to probably over a year's worth of work on a lot of folks' parts. But it's nice to see those things coming to fruition. And bottom line is we all have the same goal, which is to do what's in the best interest of our young people. And so we're making progress. We're making good progress when you take a look at the big picture. So I appreciate your support, and we'll continue to bring that information and those discussions to the board as I've presented in the schedule for the remainder of this school year. That is the end of the superintendent's report. I apologize for the length, but we did get some things done that we needed to get wrapped up.
Thank you. Public comments, we don't have any. Board business, board comments.
I would like to at least get an update. At our last meeting, there was some discussion regarding being able to attract candidates for a couple of our critical open positions. Has that gotten any better?
Yeah, that has gotten better. Actually, I talked with Dr. Moffitt just today. We have gotten more applicants as we get closer to the deadline. We are beginning interviews this next week for HR director. We have 6 candidates we've screened, 2 internal and 4 external. We'll start with that process, I believe, Wednesday and Thursday of this week. My goal is to have a recommendation to the board by at our next meeting, April 29th.
Okay.
The number of candidates for the high school principalship at Amelia High School has increased. Like many things, I'm expecting that there are procrastinators out there and they'll turn it in closer to the deadline. I'd like to see more applications than we've got right now, but it has gotten better in a week's time.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Yep.
I wanted to make a comment on a couple of activities that have gone on in the district recently. Both of our high school athletic boosters put on a dance, raised some money for both departments, if you will, and very well attended. Good time was had by all.
Great.
And then Glen Estee Middle School hosted, last week was the talent show tryouts, and this week, Thursday evening, is the talent show. And if anybody's available and wants to come and see some really talented students, Thursday evening, 6 to 8. And then this past Saturday, they hosted a color run, which was really good. They had about 250 students, not necessarily in the middle school, but a few older kids came and ran, and some younger ones came up, and it was really nice. Everybody had a good time, and it was really nice to throw some colored cornstarch at the kids to, see them all colorful and having a good time. It was nice.
I think we have some pictures of that we'll try to get on the website to share that with folks. Yeah, it sounded like it was a great time.
Yeah. So our students are out there having fun and
it's great. They like going to school.
Absolutely.
That's a good sign.
Anything else?
We agreed to discuss things after all the formal stuff, right? I'm not sure if it raised such a ruckus the last time, but we need to look at new legal advisors. And I'm not sure how you're going to want to do that, but we need to get, I would like to get an RFP from some of these firms. I think, I don't believe the firm that's doing most of the work right now is in the best interest of us or the community at large. And I mean, they gave 2 pieces of advice to the superintendent that he ignored, and one was for personal gain. I think we need to get somebody that represents the district, not the administration. And there's one firm that I'm aware of that is very, very good at representing the public that we haven't even considered.
Well, there's a couple of comments that I'd like to make on that. I think you did add that to Dr. Klein's list, didn't you, just now? Okay, so that's on the agenda of things to be done. But I think it's very important to take a look at what has happened with that legal firm that we're currently using over the last 12 months. It was a very, very difficult year for us, and the board, and correct me if you think I'm speaking out of turn, Tina, the board gave our legal counsel specific direction as we entered into our teacher negotiations and our support staff negotiations, and he represented us very well. We got concessions on salary freezes, steps and increases, as well as increase in insurance premiums being paid by our staff. I think that they've represented us very well. So I don't know, I'm not opposed to looking at other firms, but I think it's very important that we stay focused on whether or not they have experience with educational groups.
They should have some experience, yes. Or have access to the experience, I agree.
Yeah, I think it takes a little more than some experience when you're dealing with the issues that are associated with public education. And for me personally, there are so many minefields out there when we deal with the things that we do in public education that you really need to have a certain expertise in that area, and for somebody to say they're familiar with it is quite a bit different than being fully engaged in that process. And there are multiple firms that do that, but there are many that don't either. And I struggle a little bit with, as a board, that we would feel it was our responsibility to dictate the activities related to legal counsel when we hire a superintendent and treasurer that ultimately drive those things on a day in and day out basis. And our activity is really very limited in that regard. And so I'm struggling a little bit that we should be the ones to call the shots as to who the legal counsel should be, and not give our leadership an opportunity to go through some type of a vetting process. And it's on the list, so let that process take its course. And I think somewhere in the time frame of June, July, it'll be certainly a more timely discussion to bring up the pros and cons. And if a board member wants to make an individual recommendation, they can do that. But
as a board member, I would feel very disappointed if that took priority over some of the other items that we have on this list, like our overall academic performance. I think our children and their academics should be number one.
Well, and what I've discussed in the past was certainly we don't, board is interested in going through a process. We can do that, and we'll submit our RFPs and ask folks to submit proposals and go through a process. It's really more important to me, quite honestly, that the folks who work with the legal counsel on a daily basis are part of that process. And quite honestly, the directors, HR, operations, student services, and curriculum instruction are the folks who work with the legal counsel on a direct basis, much more than I do. And quite honestly, the board doesn't have that much direct contact. But as we talked about looking at that process and getting the directors involved, and Mrs. Cropper certainly from a financial perspective as well as myself, and the last conversation we had was Ms. Sanborn and Mr. Waldman would be a part of those interviews. And so my hope is that we'll be able to bring back a recommendation to the board about what's in the best interest of the district as a whole. What I will say is that most districts have multiple law firms. It's not just a law firm. And for a while, West Claremont did as well. We use not only Bricker Neckler, but Ennis, Roberts, and Fisher, who are statewide, pretty much, or at least in this region of the state, the known experts in the field of education. That being said, I'd like to play that process out. And as I said, we can't put anything else on our plate right now until the end of the school year. But I've said that we would address that once we got clear of the school year and go through that process, and then bring recommendations back from the board representatives as well as the folks who actually work with those folks on a regular daily basis to make sure that the district as a whole stays out of legal issues. So as long as we stick with that plan, I think we'll be able to work through it.
Any other discussion? Let's see. Executive session,
I have no need tonight.
roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Need a motion to adjourn?
Yes. Sorry. And a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who moved.
Mr. Lewis?
Mr. Lewis, okay.
And
then
Tammy
Mrs.
seconded.
Brinkman second.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Mr. Waldman?
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes.
Mr. Merchant?
Yes.
Motion adjourned? Meeting adjourned? Thanks.